We are curious. We've charted almost all the land on Earth. We've measured it, named it, cataloged it. But when it comes to the people that live on it, how we think, how we love, how we struggle, and how we hope, well, there is so much more to discover. Welcome to Memories of a Moonbird. I'm Daniel Scherl. This is a place for stories, connection, reflection, and exploring what it means to be human, one story at a time. So wherever you are, come sit with me for a moment, and let's begin. Hello friends, I'm Daniel Scherl. Welcome to Memories of a Moonbird. Today on the show, he's the executive director of an amazing organization in Wyoming called the Kindness Ranch Animal Sanctuary. Founded in 2007, they take animals from all over the world who've been used in laboratory testing, and they give them a chance to be rehabilitated, hopefully adopted, and if not, live out the rest of their days in peace on over 1,000 acres of sprawling, beautiful Wyoming wilderness. These people are awesome, and their slogan, which I love, is from labs to laps. And today we're going to find out that second chances aren't just for the animals. So please welcome Mr. John Raymer. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Before we jump in, I just want to give a quick shout out to both Mai and Jay Whelan and Luis Selgis for introducing us when we worked on the Mother Mai show. And Mother Mai, thank you so much for facilitating us getting together and giving us the chance to meet each other so we could circle back and bring John in for Memories of a Moonbird.
I just want to say thank you to Mother Mai as well. That was a great experience, and it was just such an honor to meet everybody and to be able to circle back around, as you said, for this.
So tell our viewers, where were you born and raised?
I was born in Salem, Oregon, and when I was about 12 years old, my dad got a bowling alley on the Oregon coast. So I grew up working with him in a bowling alley in Rockaway Beach, Oregon, just a little bit north of Tillamook, and working on fishing boats as a teenager and helping out at the bowling alley at night.
Oh, I'll bet you have enough stories from that to fill a separate podcast episode.
It would have to be a mature audience for that one.
Well, what was little John like in the land of Tillamook cheese?
You know, growing up there, it was a terrible place to be a teenager. It was just it was small town stuff, and I dreamt of the big city, and whenever I got the chance, I would run off to Portland, Oregon, and see friends for the weekend, and then circle back, go home, and try and balance wanting to get out of town with growing up in town and helping out the family a little bit. So I was definitely a little troublemaker. I had restless feet for sure.
Were you interested in animals as a kid?
I knew that I liked them, but I was more interested in, being a child growing up in the 80s. I had long hair. I wore guy liner. I played guitar, and I was more interested in parties and girls than I was anything else.
Okay, wait, I just have to say, we have to definitely cut to a picture of that when we edit this episode right now. That's epic, because I have to show you my high school picture when I had long hair and I had a battle axe earring. I can totally relate. The 80s were awesome. Now I have no hair, but it's great. I'm very curious. I was going to ask you if you think the child version of you would be happy where you're at today, but I think we should circle back to that question at the end. And instead, I do want to talk about not only how you first became involved with Kindness Ranch, but also you and I did speak offline, and you mentioned that part of your upbringing was going through a very difficult period of time, and you said you would like to speak about that in the hopes of helping others, which I think is really admirable and wonderful. So by all means, if you don't mind sharing, I think the audience would love to hear about that.
Well, what I wanted to kind of touch on is it wasn't necessarily my upbringing. I was in, a poverty household, and everybody had to work and carry their own weight, and that part wasn't so bad. It was what I didn't get when I was younger, and that was tools for proper coping mechanisms when trials and tribulations presented themselves. And You know, I thought that I was doing everything right that would make my dad proud. I had a job as a juvenile corrections officer when I got out of college, and I was married. I had a daughter on the way. I signed up for the National Guard. And when I went through a phase that, well, not necessarily a phase. I was on my way back from basic training in AIT in the National Guard, and my wife at the time told me that she was happier while I was gone. And I didn't know.
Ouch.
Yeah, it hurt. And, you know, they told me in basic training that we don't talk about what our wives do when we're there. And now I understood why. And what ended up happening with me was I crawled into a bottle of whiskey for quite a little while and just kind of threw everything away. And I battled depression. Luckily, I was able to stay away from the more hardcore drugs, but I got very suicidal. I ended up at a men's shelter in Salem, Oregon for a little while. And when,
What was that experience like?
you know, strangely enough, that's probably the highlight of this story was that the people there, it was the first time that I was able to tell somebody that I was battling internally and mentally, and nobody judged me for it. They were super, super accepting, and they took me in, no questions asked, and asked me what I needed. You know,
Do you think there's well, looking back, if I may, do you think there was something very specific that you were searching for during that time?
just a little bit of support to help get me back on the straight and narrow. It was really, really hard to go from being a corrections officer and looking at, a retirement from that job and a second retirement from the National Guard and raising my daughter to not knowing where I was going to sleep. And I didn't know how to rebuild anything from that point. And I kept looking for short-term fixes and lost sight of the long game on that.
If there's anyone out there who's listening who is struggling with similar things or addiction or alcohol, drug abuse, any of these things, is there something you'd like to say to them?
The end is not as close as you might think it is. There's an amazing, amazing journey waiting if you just stick through it and try. Just never give up. Just try.
Love it. Well, why don't you tell us how you got from Oregon to Kindness Ranch in Wyoming? The short version.
The short version is while I was at that men's shelter in Salem, I met a guy that we came up with this beautiful plan that we were going to get out of the shelter. And at that point in time, I was very suicidal. And I had a plan for how I was going to take my life. And I stole a truck from a car lot in Salem, Oregon, and we drove it from Salem to Billings, Montana, so I could see my brother. And my brother, who I knew liked to party and do drugs and drink, I told him when we arrived in Billings what my plan was, and I said, I just want to have a party with you one last time. And he said, cool, let's do it. He didn't try and talk me out of it, nothing like that. And we proceeded to party really hard and woke up on the side of the river just outside of Billings. And the guy that I left the men's mission with had taken off overnight in my stolen truck.
Wow, he double stole it.
He double stole it. Which put me in a position, my firearm and all of my clothes and everything that I was, my firearm that I was going to use to commit suicide with was in the truck. And I told my brother that I had to stay on his couch for a little bit and get a job so I could buy another gun and finish the job.
Oh my God, dude.
and this is where it takes a really interesting turn, and why I tell people to just not give up and keep trying, because I went and I got a job. I got a job at a bar where this beautiful young woman walked in, and we got to talking, and she said that she was just visiting. I said, from where? And she said that she was a veterinary technician at an animal sanctuary. And I was like, I don't know what either of those things are, but we should definitely keep in touch. and lo and behold, within the next 3 weeks, I was in Kanab, Utah, and visiting her at Best Friends Animal Sanctuary.
Oh, very cool.
While I was there, there was again just that level of acceptance and a future that I had lost sight of before. And
well, how do you think this segues beautifully into when you were there and you saw these animals, and then of course now with Kindness Ranch? How do you think that caring for animals has changed the way you maybe relate to your own pain?
I saw my pain in some of those animals, and these unfortunately animals that end up in rescues typically don't come from glorious backgrounds. They may be loved, but they were missing something. They were struggling with something. And I saw what I was struggling with in the animals. I just wanted to be accepted. These dogs that I was working with, they just wanted to be accepted. And when you have that connection and you accept each other, it gives you both purpose. And as soon as I caught some semblance of purpose in that, I just never looked back. And that was in 1999. And I've been working in animal rescue since.
And eventually the Kanab Road led you to Kindness Ranch?
In a very, very roundabout way. There isn't a state that I haven't either volunteered at an animal sanctuary or rescue of some kind or been employed at in one form or another. And I ended up with a specialty in working with wolves. And that was a really interesting 16 years off and on that I worked with wolves and larger exotic cats.
Wait, where in the country was that happening mostly?
Mostly that was at an amazing wolf sanctuary in southern Colorado called Mission Wolf, founded by Kent Weber. And it wasn't anything to do with wild wolves. It was wolves bred in captivity and sold illegally throughout the country that found their way to the sanctuary. And I loved that. I met my current wife, and I was given the opportunity.
Wait, is she the one from the original when you were in Montana and
No.
went to the bar? Okay.
No,
okay.
that
would be it. That kind of ruins the story for Memories of a Moonbird. I'm going to be honest. Like that would have been really cool, a cool through line. But whatever, John. Okay.
I aim to disappoint, my friend. No, my current wife, she actually visited the wolf sanctuary, and we kept in touch and corresponded. When the opportunity arose to take on a director position at another wolf sanctuary closer to Denver and actually begin to make some money and explore this relationship with who became my wife, I jumped on that, and I took over as a sanctuary manager at Jungle Friends Primate Center in Gainesville, Florida for about a year. And I got injured while I was there, and while I was recovering, I was thinking to myself, dogs didn't hurt me as bad as primates did. So
I was like, this is the makings of another Netflix primate special from Florida is what we have here. So.
Yeah. But what ended up happening was while I was recovering, I was looking for other companion animal sanctuaries. And then completely out of the blue, I saw that Kindness Ranch was hiring for a dog caretaker. And it was an opportunity for me to put all of those experiences to work out here to help improve not just the animals, but the sanctuary as a whole. And in about 6 months, I was offered the director position, and I've been director out here for 7 years now.
That's amazing. Well, let's talk about the animals a little bit. I was able to go to Kindness Ranch a couple of years ago for the Mother Mai show, and we worked with you for a couple of days, and it was an incredible experience. And I got to see a lot of what you do firsthand. But let's talk about the animals a little bit. Generally speaking, what kind of condition do you get them in when they arrive?
A lot of that depends on the type of research that the animals originate from. But the one constant is that they all come with a severe distrust of humans. Every interaction with a human being their entire life has resulted in being manipulated or held when they didn't want to be held, or in the worst case, pain. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's the first thing we always do is give them a soft landing and a place to kind of decompress and rebuild that trust. And when that trust begins to grow, then we learn more about what ails them physically and mentally.
Well, how long does that process take to get them to try to trust again? I mean, I'm sure animals, I'm not sure, actually, I shouldn't say that animals, I would imagine, are faster to develop a trust than a human might be. But am I wrong about that?
When it comes to the dogs that we receive, 98% of all dogs used in testing are beagles, and beagles make phenomenal pets. And those personality traits that make them phenomenal pets also make them the best research animals, because you can hurt them, you can make them uncomfortable, and they still come back to you for praise and acceptance. So,
well, like some humans, unfortunately,
like some humans, yeah. To give some research facilities a huge shout out. With the dogs that we receive, you can always tell the ones that put the animals' mental well-being first and socialize with them, because those dogs that come through, they're almost ready for adoption when they get here. Other dogs we've had here for upwards of 4 or 5 years before they're trusting enough to be adopted out.
So then there isn't an average amount of time it takes for animals to learn to trust. It's dependent on just the individual animal and their circumstances.
That's accurate, yeah. If I were to put an average on it, most dogs that come through can be adopted out within 3 to 4 months.
Oh, that's nice, actually. Yeah. What are the most significant physical or psychological challenges that you see in animals that are transitioning out of these research environments?
Psychological is what a lot of canine behaviorists would refer to as flooding. If you think about animal research as a whole, it's a very controlled environment. These dogs have never been outside before. They've never smelled coffee before. They've never seen a TV, heard a vacuum cleaner, anything like that. So when they come here, they're flooded with all of that stimuli that they've never had before. And some shut down and just want to hide under their bed. Some want to run off and hide. Some act aggressively for the first time in their life. There's a lot of triggers, and some of those triggers we never know until we find them, unfortunately. And, these are just the dogs that come through. We have goats, sheep, horses, pigs, cats. We have all kinds of other animals that suffer from similar ailments as well.
What's the hardest part of the job that you can't prepare for?
When we get the animals out and their physical ailments are so much that they can't pull through, and having to assist them leaving this world. Every now and then we get some cats or some dogs that come through that have never had a chance to build their immune system. And when they get here and they get outside for the first time and get an insect bite or exposed to pollen, their immune systems just don't quite know what to do. And we've lost, in my time here, I think we've lost maybe 3 animals to that. And those stick with me the hardest, because we were supposed to be helping them. And by bringing them out into this big world, unfortunately, it feels internally that we did the opposite. But at least they got to experience freedom and compassion for a little bit before they had to go.
Yeah. Have you witnessed a particular transformation of an animal in a good way that has deeply stuck with you?
Oh my gosh. The first one that comes to mind is this amazing beagle named Flash. That it's
All I
such
hear
a
is
fitting
Queen.
name.
Flash. Ah.
Yeah. It's been fairly well documented that dogs, when they spend their entire life confined in their kennels and research, some of them, certain people call it different things, but they kind of, for lack of a better phrase, forgive me if this isn't accurate to say, but they kind of go crazy and they just spin. They just run in their kennel and spin and spin and spin nonstop. Some of them until their feet are bloody.
Jesus.
Flash was one of those dogs, and the guy at the research facility called me and asked me if I wanted this dog. He wouldn't stop running, and he was too squirmy to test on, and it was dangerous for his staff. And I said, of course I want this dog. So I get the dog, and he does the same thing here for the better part of a month, just runs in circles and doesn't stop. And we had to restrain him so we could give him his vaccinations and get him neutered, and he just ripped the snot out of my arm. You think beagles are cute and tiny, but he just lashed out. He did not want to be held.
Wait, did he attack other dogs as other people as well, or just you? He's got a personal vendetta towards you?
I don't take it personally, but I was the only one he lashed out at, because I was the one stupid enough to try and hold him still while we vaccinated him. But after 4 or 5 months, he mellowed out, and we decided that he might be ready for adoption, but it would have to take a very special adopter. And this wonderful family came in, and for whatever reason, Flash really liked him and went up to him. And they heard about his history and some of his troubles, and they were willing to take it on. And after they adopted Flash, they reached out to a wonderful organization that we partner with called the Keeper and Kin Project, that they specialize in canine behavior from research. And this wonderful woman, Chelsea, was able to work with this family. And I still get occasional pictures now of Flash just laying out in a big grassy backyard, soaking up the sun. He doesn't run anymore. He's got a couple other dog friends that he lives with. And
that's awesome.
He curls up on the couch. And that was a dog that if we wouldn't have taken him, the lab would have euthanized him. And it's really rewarding when we see the happy endings like that.
Well, John, how do you make decisions about which animals are going to be adopted out and which ones are just going to have to stay at the ranch for the rest of their lives?
The animals help make that decision by when the visitors come. Environment plays a great deal in this, and we have to be honest with ourselves that, try as we might, we strive for what we call a home-like environment. But there's not too many homes that house up to 16 beagles in their living room. If there was, they would be called hoarders, and we're not that. But so there's some dogs that, being around all of these other dogs, it's just overstimulating, and they'll look to people for comfort and relaxation to take a break from that stimulation. And those dogs we might not consider ready because they're always scared of all of the activity and the other dogs in the room. But as soon as they see a human that they like, we have to say that, that's one that can be considered. Same with our cats. And we try and work really closely with our adopters so they know what they're getting into. They know that the dog that they see today and take home will be an entirely different dog 3 weeks, 3 months, and 6 months from now.
Yeah.
And that's why we offer follow-up behavior courses and consultations with the keeper and kin, and we've got online private Facebook groups that people can share their experiences with and get support that way. I have a signature in my email that says a lot of people talk with animals, not many listen though, and that's the problem. And
that's beautiful.
I think we've got such a great team here that they're kind of tuned into listening to the animals and seeing how they act with the people that come out, and we can kind of make a decision based on that.
There's a couple of serious aspects of what you do that I'd like to address. And the first one that I think the listeners would like to know an answer to as well, which is, how do you wrestle with the ethics of animal testing and science? And I want to clearly state here, by the way, that I know very little about animal testing, and I'm sure you could educate us much more about this. But two-part question. One, your personal struggle about it, because I would imagine there are scientific advantages for testing on animals. And then the second question is, with modern technology, do you think we're reaching a point where we no longer need to test on animals and we could avoid that altogether?
Kindness Ranch, as a sanctuary, positions itself as being extremely agnostic when it comes to animal testing. We recognize that animal testing is a thing. It's legal, and that there is a massive amount of people that believe truly to their core that it is necessary. And on a personal level, I tend to disagree with a fair amount of that, but it doesn't affect how I do my job. I know from statistics that over 96% of all animal testing on beagles does not transfer to humans. And it's been that way for over 30 years. So if we fail that much
why are they still doing it then? Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, that's...
If we fail that much at it, then why do we keep doing it? We keep doing it because it's comfort for the FDA, for USDA, for Department of Defense. All of these people are trained on how to look at those test results and choose whether to move forward or not. They're not trained on how to look at test results from AI models and what to do with that information. So on a personal level, I know that one of the only successful things that we've tested on beagles that did translate to humans is a hip replacement procedure from about 20 years ago. And, we need to move on.
Yeah, definitely.
The bright side about all of this, which I love saying and is more in line with like part 2 of your question, is currently the estimated forecast is within the next 10 to 12 years, we will no longer have to test on animals at all.
That's wonderful.
That's huge. And the lab owners that we work with are recognizing this as well. Wisconsin is moving a bill through their legislation, which will make them the 17th state in the country to have mandatory adoption laws for companion animals used in lab animal testing. Kindness Ranch works as a consultant to help prepare local rescue groups with what to expect for former research animals. And with those laws in place, and unfortunately, the microscope that it puts on the research facilities from the public and their point of view on it, a lot of research facilities are transitioning to using pigs instead of cats and dogs. And
now, okay, so we're switching to pigs, but it's still testing on animals, right? So
yeah.
Is there some advantage to work? I have no idea of working with, because pigs are super smart. I mean, is there some advantage to working with them over a beagle? Are we getting better results that are, I don't know, it's a difficult dilemma morally, right?
We're not getting any better results, but the public opinion is definitely different than cats and dogs. Your neighbor isn't getting ready to put a big dog steak on the barbecue, but we all love the smell of bacon and roasting a ham on Thanksgiving. And, I'm personally vegan. I don't do that, but I remember the smell of bacon all too well. And if you're willing to eat the animal, then you can kind of justify testing on it.
Yeah. The difference between a dinner plate and a pet in our minds, even though there's not actually a difference in real life. Yeah. How do you work with donors and regulators and the public while still staying true to the needs of the animals?
That's a really good question. For our donors, we are in a really, really privileged spot. We've got an incredible support base, an incredible donor base, a list of volunteers longer than I would have ever imagined. Mm-hmm. And we do everything as transparent as possible with these people. And everybody has access directly to me if they come and visit. They can ask me any questions they want, and I'll answer 100% honestly. We've grown exponentially in the last 4 years. We went from 6 years ago, we had a full-time staff of just 5 or 6 people, including myself, running this entire sanctuary. And we had, I think, about 40 animals total. And currently, we're over 20 full-time staff that live on the property, and we've got close to 200 animals.
Wow.
So
are you building more yurts?
We're not building any more yurts, but we are building more barns because we're getting a lot more pigs, and we're looking at putting more staff housing on the property. We're just growing and growing, and we have to make sure that growth is sustainable. And the concern that we all have, and I've talked with our donor base about, is in order to be sustainable, knowing that the number of cats and dogs are being reduced in animal research, we have to look at where we're going to focus this growth and energy moving forward, which right now it looks like pigs, and we're getting ready for a whole lot more pigs. I have the opportunity by the end of 2026 to bring in close to 100 pigs on this property.
Wow.
That's a lot of pigs.
I got to hang out with some of your pigs a couple of years ago. They're awesome.
They're incredible. You need to come out and see some of our newest ones, because the trend in research right now is all of these small miniature pigs. We've got
they're so cute.
We've got cats on the property that are bigger than some of our pigs. But
well, speaking of your volunteers, I was fortunate enough to actually get to meet some of them in person, and they're wonderful, wonderful human beings. But how do you support your volunteers given the intensity of some of this emotional work that they're doing?
That's, again, a really good question. And we're just now putting into effect this year an actual structured volunteer program. And we have, for the first time ever, a clear separation between visitors and volunteers. And the volunteers actually get training. They learn why we do things a certain way. They learn why we don't disclose the animal's origins. They just know that they're from research. They learn why we make some of the difficult choices that we make. And one thing that I'm incredibly happy to announce is this is also the first year that we've had a mental health specialist on property at all times.
That's amazing.
That's as much for the staff as it is for our long-term volunteers. And if anybody needs to decompress, they can go into his office and just sit down and have a chat and get that burden off of their chest. Because I'm sure you know as well as I do, once you say something out loud, it's just like a release. And
absolutely,
you put it out in the universe, and it's a big load off for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we not to segue into another whole podcast episode, but we live in a society where even today in 2026, therapy is still considered taboo by some people. And I know people personally that are like, oh, I'll never go to therapy. I've been to therapy a couple of times in my life. It's the most wonderful thing I ever did, especially when you're going through something difficult and tragic, when I lost my dad, things like that. Those are, I'll look right to the camera and tell people, if you're feeling stuff and you're going through tough times, go talk to somebody. It's the best. Not just your friend, not just your loved one, not just your family. Talk to a professional. And there's plenty of free therapy resources out there as well. So take care of yourself.
And on top of that, every good therapist will tell you that they need two therapists because they believe in it so much, and they have so much that they're working with as well.
John, what is the biggest misconception that you think people have about former laboratory animals?
That they're different and won't be able to transition into a home. And if I'm honest, to some degree, they're right. But that's where we come in, and we were the first sanctuary of its kind in the country. There were rescue groups, but we were the first sanctuary dedicated to research animals. And through a lot of trial and error, we've learned what works and what doesn't in getting these animals ready for homes. So that's, before that thought may have been correct, but it's not correct anymore. We're beyond the point of proof of concept. We've proven that our method works, and we can transition these dogs into homes. We can do the same with the cats.
So let's say in 10 years, there's a nationwide ban on animal testing, or a worldwide ban. We'll live in a happy world here where
Utopia.
In 10 years, utopia, there's no more animal testing. What would become of Kindness Ranch at that point?
So we're kind of positioning ourselves in a way that when animal testing is no more, we're broadening our impact on the community. We just bought and had delivered yesterday a mobile veterinary clinic, which we are going to do what's called a TNR, a trap neuter release, for all of the feral male cats in our local community, to just help reduce the wild cat population. We're also going to start doing low-cost spay-neuter clinics for all of the ranchers and their ranch dogs that don't want to make the 2-hour drive into town. So we'll take the spay-neuter clinic to them. And through some of these off-site veterinary services that we're going to be prepared to offer, we're going to use that to fund essentially a farm animal sanctuary for if there's zero animal testing going on, there's still going to be a lot of disposed animals from factory farming and local ranches that our local farmers don't want to breed. And it's important for people to know where, if they're going to choose to eat meat products, it's important for them to know where those come from. And we'll set ourselves up to just educate the public and allow them to make their own decisions as to if they're going to choose a compassionate diet or still continue to eat meat and dairy.
Has your role at Kindness Ranch and working with animals changed the way you view fellow human beings?
Yes, and in a way that I wasn't prepared for.
Ooh, okay, here we go. This is going to be good.
I've always been very empathetic when it comes to people, especially going from literally a men's homeless shelter in Oregon to working in the nation's premier research animal sanctuary. I've gone from being part of the population that the city wants to have hidden to being the face of a large organization like Kindness Ranch. It's quite the contrast.
Mm-hmm.
But being empathetic isn't enough. And what I've learned is that there's nuance and there's gray areas that the public, especially in such a politically divided world, that people don't take into consideration. It is super, super easy for me to stand on a soapbox and say that the people that work in research testing facilities on animals are Satan. We need to close it down. They're horrible people. And they're not. It's really, really difficult to explain to people that I have a relationship with these guys. I send them Christmas cards. I know their kids' names. and they believe strongly in what they're doing. Their team are super excited to send animals to us. And if I can tell just one quick little story.
Please go right ahead.
We were picking up over 100 dogs from a research facility. And this research manager was standing in the loading bay where we had our trailer loading up all of these dogs. And he was crying. And I was like, you all right? Or are you just excited to see all of these dogs go? And he looked at me and he goes, no, man, on my lunch break, I had to put my own dog down.
Oh, geez, Louise.
And the sight of this guy that has worked at this testing facility for over 30 years, this was the very first time that they had ever released dogs alive from this facility. So this is a guy that made the decision to kill thousands of dogs in his career, and he was crying over losing his own. And that nuance and that detachment that these people have, it showed me that this guy obviously cares about at least one dog. So how do you build off of that, and how do you acknowledge that and allow the compassion that he felt for that dog to be transferred to the dogs that we're picking up? And
I would be curious to ask that gentleman how he was able to kill the other animals and still have a pet. I don't know that I could do that.
People are complicated. And in ways that I'll never have a understanding of. But in seeing that, it incentivized me to find those human moments with these people, because they work by design in an industry that is secretive and hidden. And when they can connect with somebody on the outside of that and outside of that bubble, they want that just as much as I want to get the dogs out of there. And I'm happy to build those relationships and find those human moments that I can connect with the people with. And that's what has allowed me over the years to personally carry over 2,000 dogs out of research.
Well, and is that how you define success? Is that you're able to rehabilitate an animal and then either let it live out its life or get it adopted?
That's the end zone. That's the goal. But in order to do that, you have to have all of the little successes along the way, because we're not an activist group. I'm not going to stand outside of your facility with a picket sign and tell you to close your doors. I'm going to invite you out for coffee and have a discussion and see what your needs are in order for you to trust me enough to give the dogs to me willingly. And those successful connections lead to when I see a dog driving off the property with its new family. So there's stages of success.
Have you ever had to say no to an animal that needed help for some reason?
Yes.
Oh, that's gotta suck.
It was one of the most difficult decisions, and it wasn't just a single animal. There was a testing facility in the Midwest that reached out. They had received some pretty severe citations from the USDA during an inspection, and they were trying to adopt out some of their older animals that were at risk of having to be euthanized in the facility. And they didn't want the record of more euthanasia on an already questionable USDA history. So they reached out to me to see if I would take these 10 senior dogs. And the youngest beagle in the group was 12. And the oldest was 15. And they had only ever known lab research. And all of them were incontinent. And several of them were blind. And I I had to make the decision that instead of us picking them up, transporting them for 2 days to get them to the sanctuary, putting them in a brand new environment, getting them spayed and neutered, and putting them through all of that process, and then trying to find 10 loving adopters that would be willing to take in these elder animals, knowing that they'd be lucky to have 6 months with them, and all of the peeing and relieving of the bowels in the house that they wouldn't ever learn to not do. I had told the research facility that the most humane thing they could do would put the dogs down.
That's rough, man.
Everything inside of me wanted to bring these dogs out here. And, for lack of our space, for the added stress on the dogs, I don't even know how many of them would have made it through the whole process to get ready for adoption. So that one really sucked. That was an incredibly difficult decision to make, for sure.
John, I want to read you, I have a list here of 10 things that we use for animal testing. So if people don't know, it's development of vaccines like polio, rabies, COVID, etc., discovery of antibiotics and other essential drugs, safety testing before human clinical trials, understanding how diseases affect whole living systems, surgical techniques with development and refinement, organ transplant advancements, cancer treatment breakthroughs, development of medical devices like pacemakers and insulin pumps, studying genetics and inherited diseases, and regulatory safety compliance to prevent harmful products reaching humans. However, things like the cosmetics industry have already banned animal testing, and the trend is towards reducing, refining, and replacing animals. I know we talked about this earlier. How, with AI and other technologies now in existence, do you think that we could make a stronger, faster move towards getting rid of animal testing, or that we actually still have technologies to develop to get us there?
We still have some technologies to develop, but a lot of experts in the field that I've talked with at Johns Hopkins and a number of other very, very renowned colleges and labs say that we're 90% there now. Now, in some defense, and this is going to sound really weird coming from me, I have 4 dogs in my household, and I want to know that the dog food that I feed them isn't going to harm them. So with that being said, I don't see a time in the near future that we're going to be able to move away from all nutritional testing. There will be some testing of some form for years and years to come. But what they do after that testing, to me, is going to be the moral judgment on who they are as a company, who they are as just people as a whole. If you look into these AI models on a chip, think about the cost savings. Think about the employee heartbreak and retention that you would get when you mess up testing on an AI chip, on an AI model. You just reset the test. If you mess up on a dog or a cat or a rabbit, a being has to lose its life, and the person performing that test has to live with that. So there's way more downsides. And then the organization, the company funding the research, has to go out and buy more animals. And at an average cost of over $2,000 per dog, $1,700 per cat, that adds up really fast. And
and then the other side of this, honestly, not to cut you off, but is, there's all this pushback now on AI because allegedly the data centers that are producing all this technology have to run so cool that the amount of resources they're taking up is damaging the environment. And I've read a lot about this recently. And so it's like, it seems as human beings, we are struggling. I wonder if we're moving too quickly in some technologies, and we need to slow down a little bit and do things that are more environmentally conscious and in line with the future of the planet. And also, I don't know, I wonder if as a species, and this is, waxing philosophical here, but I'm wondering as a species if we actually have the ability to create these technologies and advancements and please everybody, because I don't know that we can.
No. And the argument on the AI and the data centers, that is a very valid argument. My perspective on that is I have been to these breeding facilities where they're breeding the animals for research, because it's not like they're just going down to the shelter and picking up unwanted dogs and cats.
I actually didn't know that. So they have actual breeding facilities. I wasn't aware of that.
In 2022, 2023, there was the one of the largest breeding facilities in the country that was shut down, called Envigo, where at one point in time during COVID, they lost control of their breeding program there, and they housed over 9,000 dogs, all beagles. God. And Kindness Ranch was in a very privileged position to help them begin to reduce that dog population, combined with help from another lovely lady, Sue Bell, and some friends in the industry. We were able to remove over 1,500 dogs from that facility. And then ultimately they ended up getting shut down by the Department of Justice for inhumane care, abuse, neglect, all of that.
Good.
They're, as I mentioned earlier, we're hovering around 200 animals out here, and I have a full-time staff of 20 people. When the DOJ shut down Envigo, they had over 4,000 dogs and a full-time staff of 9.
Not to be funny, but every time you say Envigo, all I hear is, "My name is Envigo Montoya." Killed my father, prepare for that.
The joke was made on many a road trip.
Yes. Princess Bride reference for those of you too young to know the movie. Go ahead.
But being on that property, what do you do with the waste that 4,000 dogs create, or 9,000 dogs? What do you do with all of the dogs that don't make it out of there alive? If you have 4,000 dogs, not every one of them is going to be suitable for research.
I mean, do they just cremate them at that point? And
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. They have untrained staff that euthanize them, and they put them in a freezer until they have a load big enough for them to be incinerated. And so I would push back a little bit that as humans, we exploit animals to the point that we are more damaging to the environment than trying to keep a data center cool. Technology will always improve, and we will at some point in the future have a much more efficient way to run those data centers. We haven't found a more efficient way to breed animals and get rid of their waste.
What's something you've had to unlearn about animals doing your job?
Planning. Your experience in the whole Hollywood scene, never work with children or animals, right? And when you work with animals, I wake up every morning, I have 10 to 15 ideas of stuff that I need to get done out here in Wyoming, and the animals will shoot me with options 20 through 45. You have to be flexible. There's no guaranteed outcome of any day. And some people can't handle having to change so many times during the course of a day, what direction they're going to go in. I personally love it. My motto out here is improvise, adapt, and overcome.
I love it. That's great. It's a great motto for life, actually.
It is.
So how do you protect your own heart and humanity from burnout doing all this? I know you said you have a therapist on site, but are there things that you do for yourself? Because, you're going to have days.
And I do have days. And obviously, given my past, I don't drink or do drugs. So it's not like I go home and drown my sorrows. I was a music major when I was in college, so I play a little bit of guitar. I compose music for our YouTube videos. I have hobbies outside of work-related functions.
I think everybody watching this show or listening to it wants to know, do you revisit the guyliner?
I haven't for some time now, but I hear all of the jokes made about J.D. Vance and his eyeliner, and it makes me tempted every now and then. So.
Hilarious. John, do you think that what you guys are doing at Kindness Ranch is actually changing the system at large?
In small incremental steps. When I took over as director, all I knew was that I wanted to save animals. And the most wonderful thing about the animal community as a whole, and I purposely stay away from saying the animal rescue community, because what we do, I don't consider necessarily rescuing the animals when I work with the facilities and they willingly give them to us. It's not like I'm running into a burning building. But in this animal community that we're so grateful to be a part of, I've met some incredible people. And through those people, it's opened doors and given access to places that I've never dreamt possible. I've had meetings on Capitol Hill with Nancy Mace, Mike Johnson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Ilhan Omar, AOC, and me, the guy that stole a truck from Salem, Oregon in 1999, have co-written legislation that's been passed in 4 different states now. So
that is, incredibly inspiring. Honestly, that for people out there watching and listening, we can't let our past define our future in that way. We have to believe that we can accomplish great things, and look at what you've done with your life. It's amazing.
Never let your luggage dictate your journey.
Oh, I love it. I'm going to add that quote to your show notes. That's great. I love it.
So with that being said, I do think that we're making a difference, and we're raising awareness. We have a great community and an incredibly dedicated staff, and it's a lot of hard work, and the failures are more than the victories, but we have to just never lose sight of what the ultimate goal is. And ideally,
wait, when you say the failures are more than the victories, I would think that would be reversed, that the amount of animals that you've saved and that get adopted and live out their lives peacefully, isn't that far greater than the ones that have tragic outcomes?
Well, I'm going to be a big wet blanket now. And last year we adopted out about 550 cats and dogs, which is a fantastic amount. That is 520 more than we did my first year here. There's 46,000 dogs alone being used in research nationwide right now. So we've only managed to get 1% of the dogs from research into homes.
And I understand that, but when I'm saying the victories are greater than the failures, I mean specifically with Kindness Ranch itself, that you guys take on all these animals, and I would think, and maybe I'm wrong, but I would think the math of your successes outweigh the failures at Kindness Ranch.
I would agree with that. I'm pigeonholing myself a little bit, and I'm looking at things bigger than Kindness Ranch and how we want to influence the bigger narrative on that. So breaking it down to what Kindness Ranch is doing as a single unit, yeah, we're kicking butt. There's no doubt about that. But I don't want it to just be Kindness Ranch only. I want everybody else that wants to get research animals released and placed into homes. I want to lift them up and let them share the victories as well.
So if you weren't an executive director at an animal sanctuary, what would you do with your life? Rock star?
A failed rock star? I've always had that artistic side of me. And when I mentioned earlier about the wolf sanctuary and I was only making $50 a week, what I did to help keep up on my child support payments that I had and all of my obligations outside of living in the mountains with wolves was I became a minimally successful photographer. And a number of my pieces did really well. And I was able to sell pictures of wolves and big cats and whatnot in the gift shop of the rescues that I worked with. I'd probably end up being, poverty stricken, but still trying to be a photographer or finding an artistic release somehow.
You'd be doing something you love, right? That's amazing. Yeah. In the bigger picture of life, what for you is the greatest mystery in the universe? Besides why people like opera, which I still can't figure out, but whatever.
The one that sticks with me the most is how, as humans, we continue to say that we do things that are good for the planet when we just never really do.
What about recycling?
Why did we make plastic to begin with?
Okay, that's a totally different podcast episode. I don't have an answer for you. I have to talk to one of my scientist friends.
And it feels like, as a species, we're just always on the take. And then, just because we try and recycle something that we designed that harmed the planet doesn't necessarily mean that we're doing good by the planet. That's just where my head goes when you ask that question. Ask me tomorrow, I'll probably give you a different answer.
All right. Well, I was about to ask you what would be the title of your autobiography, but I think I'm going to call it Buzzkill Johnny. No, but what would be the title of your autobiography?
Well, Just Keep Swimming, I think, is probably taken, but I just don't give up. Don't give up. Say what you will about Alan Watts. He has one of those quotes that kind of sticks with me, that what would you do if money wasn't a concern? And whatever that is, do that. Do it the best that you possibly can, and then ultimately never do it for free. And
I love that.
I kind of latched on to that. So that's a long title for an autobiography, so we'd have to shorten it. But
yeah, no, why bother? I think the long title's great. Speaking of writing, what was your favorite childhood book?
When I was in grade school and junior high, there was one book that I read over and over and over again, and it was by Alexander Key, and it was called The Forgotten Door. And it was this door that opened up to another planet, and there was a kid from another planet that walked through the door onto Earth, and he was kind of a freak, and nobody really knew what to make of him, and ultimately he ended up doing really good and saving this family that took him in from some calamity of some sort. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I always remembered the author and the title of the book, and I read that thing so many times.
What's a movie you saw that made you cry?
Tom Hanks in Captain Phillips. The ending of that one gets me every time when he finally breaks down after he's been rescued from the pirates. Spoiler alert. And my mom, when she was alive, she was an amazing, amazing classical pianist. And I remember growing up listening to her play Beethoven and just loving it. And there's a movie from the 90s that Gary Oldman was in called Immortal Beloved.
It's great. I love that movie.
I love that movie so much.
Yeah. Well, listen, since you're a musician, one of my other favorite questions to ask on the show is, it's 8:00 at night. You have the house to yourself. No one's there. You want to put on your jam song and dance around your underwear. What's your go-to tune?
Well, being the 80s metalhead that I am, the first one that comes to mind that isn't some obscure progressive rock instrumental would be probably Whitesnake's Still of the Night.
Oh, nice. Good choice. Good choice. Also a fellow 80s rock lover myself. If we can harken back to the pictures of us with big hair. John, you get the honor of being the first person to get asked a question, which is a new section of the Memories of a Moonbird podcast, which is all about food, one of my favorite subjects. And the question, as you know, because I told you ahead of time, is what is a particular dish that just has a special meaning to you and why? And then I'm asking each guest to email me that recipe. And then the people that are paid subscribers on Patreon to the show will get emailed that recipe exclusively as one of the little perks of being a supporter of the show. So, I told John specifically, don't tell me ahead of time what it is. I want to hear it live on the show. So, Mr. Raymer, what is your specialty dish that means something to you and why?
For me, my go-to is a vegan lasagna. From the time I was learning to read, I would say probably 6 to 7 to 8 years old, my grandmother would cut out every single daily Garfield comic strip for me and put them into a book and give them to me for Christmas every year.
Oh,
And
go grandma.
Garfield was, as we all know, a huge lasagna fan. And I don't remember a time in my life that I never wanted a lasagna as like my comfort food. And so when I decided to go vegan, it took me a long time to find a vegan lasagna recipe that I really liked. And now I've got my go-to, and I have it all typed out and ready to send to you.
Fantastic. I can't wait. And I might just try it. What kind of noodles do you use?
I make my own.
Wow.
But
wow. Look at you.
In the recipe, there's suggestions as well.
Okay. John, one of my other favorite questions that I ask on the show is this. If you could sit down in an old-timey pub, let's just say somewhere in Scotland or Ireland for fun, and you could sit with anybody from human history and talk to them for 3 hours, except for any religious prophets or any member of your own family, so no, talking to your mom or whatever, because we all would like to talk to our people who have passed. But if you could talk to anybody in history, all of human history of the earth, the question is, who would you sit with? What would you drink? And what would be the first question you would ask them?
Full disclosure, you gave me a heads up that you were going to ask me this question, and I have really, really struggled with it. The one that I keep coming back to, and I honestly have no idea why, but it would be Benjamin Franklin. And I don't know what we would be drinking. If I was still alcohol free, it would obviously be a tea of some sort. But
so tea, okay, you're having tea with Benjamin Franklin.
I would just have to open a conversation with what makes you click and why did you invent so many things? Because there's got to be a level of drive and curiosity that I'm not quite clicking with to have somebody so inquisitive about the world around them, and to be involved in politics and inventing things and all of his writings. And I believe he coined, so you should not be forgotten as soon as you die. Write things worth reading or do things worth writing about.
Absolutely.
And I love that. And
I agree.
Whoever can come up with that, I want to talk with them.
Yeah, that's great. And I think also what's interesting is another great podcast episode we could do would be talking about in the era when Benjamin Franklin was alive. I think some people would argue that, well, it was easier for him to be passionate because so much had been undiscovered and there was so much opportunity out there. And look, the world was just ripe for change. And I disagree that some people say it's not like that today. I think it's even more today. There is so much more to discover, so much more to explore. I just think we're just getting started, man. So go out there, people, and explore. John, what's your guilty TV pleasure?
I have a hard drive with all of the seasons of Top Gear that when I struggle going to sleep, I'll put on episode 3 of season 2. Or
awesome.
I love that trio, and They carried me through some really long road trips and boring nights at hotels.
What does the executive director of an animal sanctuary think is the meaning of life?
There was another movie quote. I'm struggling to remember the name of the movie, but they asked a blacksmith why he continues to do what he does. And he said, what measure of a man doesn't try to consistently improve the world around him? And that's, for me, that is kind of the meaning of life for all of us. If we're all just passionately trying to improve our surroundings, then we should just be able to come together as a whole and do better, not just by our immediate surroundings, but for the world around us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree. And thank you, because that is such a wonderful statement about trying to bridge the gap of the divisiveness, especially in our country right now. And I really appreciate you saying that. What quality do you admire most in human beings?
Imagination. There's a theory, a cognitive trade-off hypothesis that they did where primates were able to recall the locations of numbers on a screen after only viewing them for a fraction of a second. And they say that humans can't do that because we have imagination, and it makes it more difficult for us to immediately remember important information. Whereas they believe primates in the wild, they have to be able to immediately assess their surroundings and make a decision as to whether or not to proceed forward, where their food is, or what their immediate needs are. And we cloud our judgment by thinking, well, if I choose this number, what'll happen? And we begin to imagine what'll happen. But as that makes us primarily different than the primates, it also allows us to imagine what would be better for the planet as a whole, what would be better for humanity as a whole. It allows us to imagine how we can better take care of the animals that we're supposed to be stewards of. Clean drinking water. It helps us imagine all of the wonderful things that we can do instead of dwelling on all of the bad things that we may have done.
Amen. Are you afraid of dying?
No. I'm afraid of what pain I might feel in the process, but I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of dying at all. This world has given me so much in the last few years that as long as I'm trying to give back a little bit, I'll feel like my life had purpose.
Well, that fits in beautifully to what do you hope people say at your funeral?
He never quit trying.
I like it. Well, okay. If there's a heaven, and let's just say for argument, God exists, and assuming they let you in, John, what would you like to hear God say the moment that you meet?
They've been waiting to say thank you, and then open the gates, and I get to see all the animals that I rescued.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. It's great. What superpower would you choose?
Flight. I'd want to fly. Because I'd be able to relocate all of these dogs so much quicker if I could just fly down and pick them up. 3 days on the road with 20 dogs is really taxing on a human.
Well, now we're getting into weight-bearing physics. I don't know how many dogs you could actually carry.
I didn't say I'd carry all 20 at once. Beagles are pretty small, though.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe you can pack them in little backpacks and wear them, and like their heads can poke out. It's like a dog is in the window of a car. They can. If you could tell your younger self anything, what would it be?
I don't know. My younger self would never have guessed where I ended up. My younger self, all I wanted to be was a rock star, and I wanted people to be proud of what I was doing. I wanted to share music. I wanted to I wanted to make a difference, but I didn't know how. And I think I would have just told myself to take more chances and not steal that truck.
I think it's safe to say that you have saved countless animals. And I was very privileged to talk to one of your volunteers when I was there. And she said that people don't understand that it's not just us saving animals, it's animals saving us as well, which I thought was really quite wonderful. For people that have watched the show, beyond donating money, what is something that they can do either in their community or in their lives? And if they do want to donate money, can you tell them what that money would be used for?
One of the best things that people can do is to just simply share that places like Kindness Ranch exist. There's now other sanctuaries and a larger number of rescue organizations that focus entirely on research animals. And although in our little world, we know of everybody and the good work that they're doing, the people in the research facilities, the people that you bump into day to day, they probably don't know. So it's important to just inform people that this is a solution to a problem that shouldn't exist. So just share the message. And if people want to go to kindnessranch.org and donate, I'm proud to say that over 60% of every dollar donated goes directly to animal care. And we're very, very transparent about how we spend the money. We are getting set up for the most intense financial audit we've ever had. We're really putting the pieces in place so people can donate confidently and know that the money that they give to us is being used wisely. It's being used to affect change. And if it comes to direct animal care, no expense is spared in making sure that these animals have the best chance possible at a forever home.
Have you guys looked into franchising Kindness Ranch to expand the brand and the kind of care that you provide?
We want to make sure in the short term that the growth we've experienced isn't just a fluke and that where we're at right now is completely sustainable. We are exploring options of getting property in a couple other states and opening up adoption centers. But with the natural trend of cats and dogs being used in research on the decline, whatever relationship we get into with an adoption center or purchasing property, we have to make sure that it is suitable for multi-use. If we want to move a farm animal sanctuary down there or just pigs or horses or something like that. So it's not entirely out of the question, but we want to make sure that we can continue to operate where we're at now and then explore growth options in a few years when we see if the trend is actually going down for cats and dogs or not.
That would be wonderful to have a Kindness Ranch in multiple states, you know?
I agree. We just want to make sure that we do it correctly, and it's something that our supporters and our donors also support and want to help fund.
And I know this more than anything, which is if this does become a franchise thing around the world, there'll be a Kindness Ranch cafe on every location where they'll serve the Memories of a Moonbird vegan lasagna.
Absolutely. Yeah. And really good coffee.
And really good coffee. I'm a tea guy, so tea. We'll have Benjamin Franklin tea and Memories of a Moonbird vegan lasagna. There you go.
Perfect.
I know at the beginning of the podcast, we talked about circling back to this question, would the child version of you be happy with you today? And I'd love to hear your answer.
You know, I think so. Probably be very shocked, but my goal was to be the type of man that I wouldn't mind my daughters dating. So
that's great.
If I've achieved that, then I can't help but to think that the younger version of me would be happy with how I turned out.
That's awesome, man. That's really awesome. I hope more people aspire to that kind of goal, and I think that's wonderful. All right, John, one of my One of my all-time favorite things to do on this show is at the end, we play a little game called 299 Questions with Moonbird, and you get to pick two numbers, and I will read you those two questions, and you answer them from 1 to 299. What, sir, are your numbers?
In memorial of an old George Carlin bit where he talks about how fun a certain number is to say, I'm going to say 252.
252. And what's the second one?
The second one will be 53.
252 and 53. Do you want them in that order?
Sure.
All right. Question number 252. What was the most thoughtful gift you ever received?
Oh, wow. I'm going to have to say that I probably just got it today. Recently, my best friend, Rocky, a dog I rescued when I first got to Kindness Ranch, he passed away. And a absolutely, truly amazing supporter is an incredible artist. And she, without any knowledge of me, knowing beforehand, did a phenomenal watercolor painting and sent it to me, and I just received it today. And my wife and I spent about 2 hours crying over it, and then wrote her a thank you. So, in recent memory, it's that.
Okay, and 53 was your other question. Ooh, boy. Why did your last relationship end?
Oh, that one's actually really easy.
Great.
It ended because I wasn't the man that I wanted to be, and I was trying to pretend to be somebody that I wasn't. And you can't build a relationship off of pretending to be somebody. So I have to take full responsibility on that one.
You know, that is actually amazing that you said that, and something that I 100% agree with you on, that we just can't, if we want to be happy, I think that's the caveat. If you want to be truly happy, you can't run around being this fake version of yourself. You need to be true to who you really are in life. And
exactly.
That's also incredibly admirable of you to admit that to the entire planet Earth. That's a beautiful thing, man. For real. I deeply appreciate your vulnerability and willingness to be real. It's fantastic. And I hope it inspires other men in the world to talk about their feelings. It's really important.
Well, I hope so too. You know, again, going back to the first question, or not even the first question, but the childhood version of me question, being the type of person that I would be happy if my daughter dated. And there's, I want my daughters to be happy and be with good men. And if they don't have a good man in their life as a role model, then what are they going to base that on?
100%. John Raymer of the Kindness Ranch Animal Sanctuary, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It has been an absolute honor and pleasure to talk with you again. It was an honor to meet you in person a couple of years ago. And the only thing I need to ask you is to send me a t-shirt, because I don't have one.
It'll be in the mail by the end of the weekend.
John, thank you so much for being here, and please take care of yourself.
An absolute honor, and thank you so much for such a good conversation.
Sometimes, if we're lucky, we meet someone like John whose work reminds us that kindness isn't an abstract idea, but something that can pull us back from very dark places and give both humans and animals a second chance. It's a daily choice made quietly and often out of sight. If this conversation moved you, and I hope it did, I encourage you to learn more about Kindness Ranch and support their work in whatever way you can, because the way we treat the most vulnerable among us says a lot about who we are as human beings. Please visit them at kindnessranch.org. And hey, even though you've heard this 10 bajillion times by now, if you're watching this on YouTube, please click the like and subscribe and the notification buttons, and just click all the buttons, because it really does make a difference. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for listening or watching or both. And until next time, stay safe.